Good morning, y'all.
Morning.
I did not expect to see this many people being so, I guess you could call it, the weather's just ducky. Yeah.
Liquid sunshine.
Liquid sunshine. Oh, well, okay. They say that it's always nice to start off with just a little affirmation for everyone, something to feel good, the day to start off well. And I was thinking, what's something kind and nice I could say to everybody this morning? And it struck me that you're all weird, you're odd, and you're just strange people.
Thank you. That's a compliment.
It is. It is. And it's the nicest thing I could think of. And I certainly fit there. Yeah. I'm going to kind of rip through this little intro because I want to get to the story. But it seems like, I don't know about you, but it seems like I came out of the womb just not believing that this world was all that it was cracked up to be. It seemed like I was always just a little countercultural, a little off center. And I know I just disappointed the snot out of my parents a lot. But that's okay, because I think that's just the way that's the way I had to pop out of the womb in order to see the world for what it is. Maybe, that's why I gravitate toward people like you guys that are strange and odd and weird. I've learned that the world and society really is pretty much upside down. It's just not, it's not the way that it's said to be. The institutions always like to tell us that they're on our side, regardless whether the actual motive that they are functioning under has anything to do with our own best interest. And that's what kind of frightens me. I remember not too long ago when I went in, I decided to move all of my savings to a central location. And I went and I spoke to this man who came in. He was the friendliest guy in the world. He was so relaxed and nice and was telling me this place is, I think it was called Sun Investments or something, how fabulous it was, that I was like, wow, let's put everything in there. I found out later it was like one of the biggest scams on earth, and that's when I moved it to the same place Rhonda has it, which is yeah, Fidelity, which is works out really nicely. But why didn't I realize that when I speak to someone, they're going to be functioning out of their best interest, not mine. And only people that are weird and strange like you will actually take my best interest at heart. And that's why you are my friends. And I believe also that's why I gravitated toward the person of Yeshua. Because he always existed on the edge of society. He was always in trouble. He was always doing things that upset the status quo. And I related to that. I think one of the most constant themes throughout the New Testament is that we are in this world, but we're not of it. And last night I Googled, I was like, okay, I want to find out. I can't remember. Where is that passage that it says that we're in the world, but not of it? And all I could find, and I'm not making this up, was list after list after list of things that said, here are all of the passages that say that in the New Testament. It's a theme throughout, that we are in the world, but we're not of it. And that makes me very comfortable, because I don't want to be of this world. I don't want to be stuck here. I want to be a sojourner. I want to be here to walk through it and enjoy my time and then punch my card and go somewhere else. I'm serious. There are things that society has told me that I've learned are really upside down. One of them is consumerism, that if you work really, really hard, you could get lots and lots and lots and lots of things, and you can fill your house with it, and that's going to make you happy. John, do you not believe that? Well, I say, okay, there's somebody that's just somebody like me that just didn't buy it. But that's a huge thing in society. I mean, just turn on your TV and look at any commercial, and it's going to be there. Or they'll give you the image of how you're supposed to look, and this is what beauty is. Well, the only way you can get there is to starve yourself to death forever and ever. And but I mean, no, no, no. And politics, I love this one. That they basically tell us that those people that are out there making our laws and the corporations that sponsor them are on our side, and they're working for your best interest. Did you watch the spectacle of the Speaker of the House getting elected?
You need some Lysol now?
Now you do.
Other people use that, like-
She says with the mask on, but it's true. It's true that I need Lysol. It is true that that's what we are taught. That's what's shoved down our throat. And I love the one that says that they're just like the cars that race, that they wish that they would have the corporations that sponsor them, to be put on their clothes so that they all know. That's the truth. And it's not going to be told to us. We're told that we're supposed to live long and prosper. I can kind of do that. You do it really well. Now that's not too bad. Okay, so live long and prosper. You know what? How important is it? Talk to Danny about this. He's got this down. And that's, living long is okay. But if I don't live long, what happens? Is it possible for me not to live long? Can you hear what I'm saying? It's not possible for me not to live long. And to prosper, a lot of that says that, well, justice is that everything is supposed to be rosy and perfect in this world. You're supposed to always be comfortable. You're supposed to always be happy. You're supposed to not be sick. You're supposed to not go through hardship. That those are bad things. And that's what society tells me. But as I look back in my life, those are the things that got me into this spot right here. It was the difficulties that caused me to grow. And if I look back and I said, what am I the most grateful for? It would be those things that allowed me to mature. Sometimes good things allowed me to mature too. Sometimes good things helped me to grow, and that's wonderful. That's really cool. But it's not that I was always comfortable in each and every moment of my life. If that were the case, I would probably be just an immature blob that still believed the politicians were on my side. Okay, sorry. I hope I'm not breaking anyone's bottle here. And religion. That's another one that tells me that the world is a little upside down. Basically, religion is telling me that they have all the truths, and those truths are there for you, especially, and that you're supposed to buy into them. And the goal of each religion appears to be, in my mind, to pull your conscience out of your body and replace it with a set of doctrines. That's one thing I love about the Spiritual Light Center. To my knowledge, we are the only place I know of in this area. There's got to be places, other places, but I don't know of any that don't have doctrines, that aren't a religion, that don't give us a set of things that say, this is what we believe. When I went to UU, I speak there sometimes, and they're very clear. It's a religion. Love it, nice place, good people, but it's a religion. Um, Unity, I love unity. It's a religion. They will tell you this is our doctrines. Science of mind, very clearly a religion. You know, this is what we believe, and this is what we teach, and this is what we encourage you to believe. Great. I want to learn from that. I don't want to stay there. We could go on and on about that, the things that society have taught us that's not true, but I don't want to spend the rest of the time on that. You know what I'm talking about. Unfortunately, when I first realized that this was true, I became angry when I was a kid. And I started to rebel, and I pulled myself away from the world. And as a result, I got isolated. I ran away. I felt lonely and I felt hurt. And I didn't want to be part of anybody or anything. And I realized there had to be a way that I could function fully in this world and to be in it, although not of it. And it took a long time, but I finally realized that it was, for me, union with spirit was the only way that I could be in this world and not be angry or dependent upon it for my well-being or for my emotional security or my peace of mind. Now, I know that I and my creator have co-created whatever reality I'm in. And it is that creator, it is the spirit that has my best interest at heart. It's not the work of society. It's my understanding that God and this world are benevolent. And that's a huge realization. And it allowed me to be here, but not be of it. To be here and to be at peace. And to know that I am going to be led through this world. And each step is going to be where it belongs. Okay, you know, I'm going to skip the rest of this little part. I want to start with this little story. It's a story I wrote a long time ago, and it's about a young lady that all of you know very well who fell upside down into a rabbit hole, and she came to learn that upside down might be the right way to see the world as it really is. And so here it's all about Alice. You ready? Well, how am I supposed to start this? Thank you. Yeah, it was a dark and stormy night. Well, it was for her when she fell down the rabbit hole. Well, once upon a time, Alice sat by the bank of a river, and she was considering, as well as she could, for the day was hot and it made her feel very sleepy, whether the pleasure of making clover chains would be worth the trouble of getting up and picking the clover blossoms. When suddenly, a white rabbit with pink eyes ran right beside her. There was nothing so very remarkable about that, and nor did Alice think very much about it, until she heard the rabbit say, "Oh dear, I shall be late." And when she thought about it afterward, it occurred to her that she ought to have questioned this. But at the time, it seemed quite natural. Then, when the rabbit actually took a watch out of its waistcoat, looked at it, and hurried on, that Alice started to her feet. It flashed across her mind that she had never before seen a rabbit with either a waistcoat or a watch to take out of it. And burning with curiosity, Alice ran after the rabbit and was just in time to see it pop down a rabbit hole under the hedge. In another moment, Alice went right after it, never considering how in the world she was going to get out again. Thank you for bringing water. The rabbit hole went straight on like a tunnel for some way, and then it dipped suddenly down. down the rabbit hole. Mm. Ah, I like to wear my water. So suddenly, oh, wait a minute. And then Alice said to herself, I wonder if I shall fall straight through the earth. I think I've gone about 5,000 miles already. How funny it will be to come out among the people who walk with their heads pointed downward. The antipathies, I think. She was rather glad that there was no one to hear her because it didn't sound quite right. I think I have to ask them what country this is. Please, ma'am, is this New Zealand or Australia? She decided to curtsy as she spoke. Imagine curtsying while you're falling through the air. Down, down, down she went, and there was nothing else to do, so Alice began to talk again. Dinah, I'll miss you very much tonight, I think. Dinah was her cat. Oh, poor Dinah, I wish you were here with me, but there are no mice in the air, I'm afraid, but you might be able to catch a bat. And that's very much like a mouse, you know. But do cats eat bats? And here Alice began to get very sleepy and went on saying to herself in a dreamy kind of way, do cats eat bats? Do cats eat bats? And sometimes, do bats eat cats? For you see, she couldn't answer either of the questions, so it didn't matter much which way she put it. Now, Dinah, tell me, did you ever eat a bat? And then suddenly, thump, bang, down she came upon a heap of dry leaves, and the fall was over. Alice wasn't a bit hurt. She jumped to her feet and looked up and saw that it was all dark overhead. Before her was another passage, with the white rabbit still in sight. There wasn't a moment to lose. And away like the wind went Alice, and just in time to hear the rabbit say, as it turned around the corner, oh, my ears and whiskers, how late it's getting. And then the rabbit was nowhere to be seen. He had slipped into an opening along a long side low hall. Alice wasted no time at all chasing the white rabbit through the door and out into a beautiful garden. She arrived all out of breath and missing one shoe. Well, what's the use of one shoe, she thought. I'll look curious introducing myself in this state. And so she tossed her remaining shoe in the bushes nearby. Hardly a stone's throw away was a giant marble chessboard with every sort of the most unusual chess pieces, each one quite alive and moving upon command. At one end of the board was the White Queen, white as snow, wearing a sparkling cape and ordering a lavender loon to hop ahead 2 spaces. She looks dreadfully temperamental, Alice thought. And across from the queen was the most curious king Alice had ever seen. He was dressed in plain, simple clothes and wore a crown of hand-hewn wood sitting sideways on his head. Down 2 and over 1, if you please, he directed the muskrat with a voice that made Alice feel quite welcome. And around the board, standing at attention, were birds and badgers, and of course, the white rabbit, who was much too late to play. Off in a low branch of a tree was the Cheshire cat, who gave with a big grin, who was in the habit of fading in and out of sight. Calling together her courage, Alice approached and said, if you please, my name is Alice. Is this Australia or New Zealand? I'm quite turned around. Looking up without a hint of surprise, the king set his eyes upon her and said, can you do addition? What's 1 and 1? And 1 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 and 1. Well, I don't know, replied Alice. I've lost count. Well, she can't do addition, said the queen, her eyebrows raised. And then she asked, well, can you do division? Divide a loaf by a knife. What's the answer to that? Well, I suppose, and then a blank look overtook Alice's face. Bread and butter, said the queen. Now try subtraction. Take a bone from a dog. What remains? Alice considered carefully. Why, the bone wouldn't remain, of course. if I took it and the dog wouldn't remain, it would come to bite me. And I certainly wouldn't remain. I'd run. So you think nothing would remain, said the queen. Alice thought for a moment and she said, well, yes, I suppose that's the answer. Wrong again, exclaimed the queen. The dog's temper would remain. Why, look here, said the queen with her eyes wide. You took the dog's bone and it lost its temper, didn't it? I suppose it did, replied Alice. Then if the dog ran away, its temper that it lost would remain, said the queen triumphantly. Alice couldn't help but think to herself, what a dreadful nonsense we're all talking. This is the most curious conversation I've ever had anywhere. Which reminds me, said the queen with his crown all askew, we had a terrible thunderstorm last Tuesday. It was such a loud storm you couldn't think. Part of the roof came off and ever so much thunder got in. It rolled around the room in great lumps, knocking over the tables and things, until I was so frightened I couldn't remember my own name. To this, Alice exclaimed, I would never try to remember my name in the middle of a storm like that. What would be the use of it? Your Majesty must excuse her, purred the Cheshire Cat. She means well, but she can't help but saying foolish things as a general rule. And the king bent forward to examine his next move. He slowly resumed his upright position and noticed that Alice had begun to cry softly. He pursed his lips just slightly, and he turned to Alice and said in a velvety voice, happy are those who weep in sadness. Alice rubbed her wet eyes and turned to the king in disbelief. Your Majesty, not meaning to be rude, but I cry only when I'm sad. And then, of course, when I'm sad, I'm not happy. Nonsense, said the White Queen loudly, who seemed unsympathetic to her tears. She then smiled broadly and burst into peals of unqueenly laughter, sounding like the chimes of a bell, while the king just let out a long sigh. Alice thought she couldn't tolerate any more of this nonsense, but the king began to speak again. You know, it feels good to be loved, but it's better to love oneself. Alice wrinkled her brow, still trying to make a shred of sense out of all of this talk. Your Majesties, I want more than anything else in the world to be loved, and that's what makes me happy. When I'm not loved, I feel very, very sad. Alice thought to herself that perhaps neither the king or the queen had known the love of a cat like her own Dinah, and a sense of pity swept over her. There was a welcome silence before the king spoke again. And another thing, it's nice to have nice things, but it's better to not. And with that, the king stretched out his hand toward all his empty chessboard spaces and gave Alice a sort of Mona Lisa smile. And Alice placed her head pensively on her hands. Alice placed her head pensively into her hands and questioned nothing in particular, but began to whisper, nicer to not, nicer to not have, nicer to be without nice things. And at this, Alice finally spoke up loudly, my dear king and queen, talk about nice things. Why, if I become a queen, I shall have a palace filled with nice things, hundreds and hundreds of beautiful and elegant things. Why, that's part of being royal. And if I can have them, I will. That's only common sense. And then from the edge of the board, one of the chess pieces called out, common sense, common sense, common sense makes fools. And the royal pair clapped their hands in rhythm as they took up the chant. Common sense, common sense, common sense makes fools. And then everyone on the board joined in, leaping about, somersaulting, or executing giant cartwheels from square to square. And when finally the ruckus died down, Alice was amazed to find that everyone on the board was standing upon their heads. The antipathies, Alice remembered, although she was still quite afraid that wasn't quite the right word. The king, from his upside down position, tried to get Alice's attention. My dear, you're not yet quite a queen, and I'm giving you a final chance to test your true wisdom. If there were 5 loaves and 2 fishes for a banquet of 4,000 people, what quantity of food would each person receive? Well, your royal inverted majesty, it would hardly be worth coming to a banquet of that sort. You'd barely get 1 scale of a fish or a crumb of bread. Common sense tells me that that meal would hardly be a banquet at all, not even a snack worth bothering about. And this time, the White Queen started to chant, which again was taken up by the entire chessboard. Common sense, common sense, common sense makes fools. And defensively now, Alice glanced all about this upside down menagerie with their legs, some long and thin and others fat and short, all legs wiggling in midair, and she protested strongly. You are the ones who are mixed up, my friends. Why, just look at yourselves. Feet are made for standing upon, and heads are made for. And she hesitated for a moment and then said, well, heads are made for upright thinking. And now the king looked at Alice as lovingly as he could in his somewhat awkward position and said, oh, yes, my dear Alice, you talk about feet and heads and the common sense that's all in your little brain, but you forget about the heart. His words came softly and carefully. 'Tis the heart that really counts. The heart is made for believing and for hoping and for loving. Common sense tells us that 4,000 people could never be fed on 5 loaves or 2 fishes, but you don't reckon with the power of belief in your heart. Indeed, everything seemed so very curious and backward to Alice. But then she blushed as she began to remember stories that she'd heard somewhere long ago, stories about loaves and fishes, and others about those who healed with the mere touch of their hand, and even more stories about great wisdom which came from still voices that were heard when no one was really in sight. And suddenly Alice's eyes popped open and she cried aloud, I know, I know. It's the world that's upside down and not you. And then Alice humbly lowered her head until it actually touched the earth. And then she lifted her feet up into the air to join her upside down friends, the antipathies. A great glowing warmth spread all over her being, and Alice felt a sense of oneness with the others. And from the dark recesses of her mind came many sayings and truths she'd come across somewhere. And now, for the first time, they made good sense. Blessed are the poor in spirit. Blessed are those who weep. Blessed are the peacemakers. And Alice took a deep breath and shouted out joyfully, blessed are those whose hearts are filled with belief and hope and love, because these hold the keys to treasures that common sense can never discover.